A number of people I need to thank for this, and I know that as you came in, we had a couple members of our student athletes helping us out, and Jodi was at the registration desk. This event does not come off without the help and assistance of Jake Curran. I know I've heard from already a couple of the inductees this evening, very appreciative of the effort that Jake puts in to reach out to teammates, make this event special. So certainly, Jake, thank you for all of your assistance tonight. Joni in the back, if all of you would just please join me in thanking the group behind the scenes here at Bethany to make this work. Members of the Athletic Hall of Fame Committee are listed for you as well. Jake and I have been lucky enough to serve on that committee for a number of years. Coach Ryan Craig is here, the current co-director of athletics at Bethany. Art Westphal, Mark Mattson, Ron Young, and then Barry Wartell, who has been probably, I would say, within our community, covered Bethany events through local radio stations and actually covered a number of our games, did play-by-play for everything from basketball games, baseball, and things like that. And so those people serve on the committee that make these selections every year. I also do have to give a shout out here because she's here tonight. It always is very appreciative on our behalf when we get some comments and thoughts from past coaches and things like that. So at times we certainly reach out, and one of those people are here tonight as well, Coach Lynette Bernardy. And so Lynette, thank you very much for all of the input you provided us with as well. And it's good to have you here, and you will hear from Lynette a little bit later in the evening. 5 people going into the Hall of Fame tonight, and as I kind of tried to attempt to gauge this, in talking to people and reading some of the materials, obviously statistically these individuals certainly deserving of being in the Hall of Fame, but I think if you would look at all 5 of these individuals, beyond the fact of the fantastic athletic ability they have, comments that we were consistently seeing when talking to their former teammates and former coaches would be comments like quiet, not flashy, unassuming, unselfish. All 5 of these individuals played on championship teams. I think it's quite easy to say that while individually they certainly had athletic attributes that deserve them being here tonight, maybe one of their biggest attributes was the fact that they had the innate ability to make every player that they were surrounding themselves with better. That's why they became part of championship teams, because as good as they were individually, the surrounding cast, they simply made better just because of their ability to play. And again, all of them with their demeanors were not necessarily going to sit there and wow you, but when you saw them play at such a high level, such a consistent level, there's no doubt the fact that they certainly are deserving of being part of the group here tonight. We're going to kick things off with a guy named Jerald Binder. Jerry is from Rushville, Indiana. Now, if you don't know where Rushville is, I got to be honest with you, I know a lot about geography and maps. I didn't know where Rushville was either. But when I looked it up, it's kind of between Indianapolis and Cincinnati. And for those of you who are really into some great athletic movies growing up, we all remember the movie Hoosiers. Milan, Indiana is not too far away. It's just a little bit north. I'm seeing some nods here at the Binder table. So Milan, Indiana, which is kind of serves as the basis from the 1954 state championship team, not too far away. Jerry came from basketball country. Jerry probably could have went to a lot of different schools to continue his athletic participation, and somehow the Lord directed him to come here to southern Minnesota and play for Bruno Walensky and take our team here. Was part of a fantastic team. In fact, Jerry has the distinct honor. His team actually went in a few years ago as part of our team of distinction class that you see there as well. And Jerry part of that group, and now tonight he individually becomes a member of our Athletic Hall of Fame. We have some friends here. Jerry, unfortunately, unable to make it to Mankato this evening, but we have some very special people who mean a lot to Jerry, and they're going to speak on his behalf here. And I'm going to give the microphone over to one of those individuals right now, Luther Dorr.
Thank you. I should say the first that Mr. Binder was a brother-in-law of mine, so take that into consideration. He was one of the most competitive people I've ever seen. He was great. And so tonight I'm going to separate the man from the myth. When he was a sophomore here, he scored 44 points and tied Bruno Walensky's record for the school. And then he missed 2 free throws. And for years and years and years, the myth has been that he missed them on purpose because he didn't want to upstage Bruno. Bruno was his coach. So Monday I called him on the phone, and we talked for quite a while. And I said, did you miss those free throws on purpose? And he said, no, I've never done that. Now, he was 700 miles away, so I don't know if he's telling the truth or not. He was a great player. But I wanted to ask Bruno tonight, and he's not here. I was going to ask Ron Young, who was a classmate of his. Another quick story about Jerry. He was just fierce on offense. He was a great driver. And there was a game when he was a sophomore where he took 2 charging fouls. He knocked the guy down twice because the guy was guarding him really closely. And after those second foul, that guy stayed back the rest of the night. And Jerry had a great night. He didn't care. He took those fouls on purpose so that he'd intimidate that guy, and apparently he did. Anyway, I say it was competitive, and in the early 70s, I was visiting in Indiana, and we played tennis together. And I had played more than him, so I probably did better than him. And then he took me to the Legion and got me to play snooker, and I got snookered. He had played a lot. I had played pool, but I hadn't played much snooker. Also, we got together and played golf one day, quite a few years later. And I made a long putt, which is rare for me. And he made a longer putt, and the game was on, and we got rained out. So we'll never know what happened that day. Then he visited Princeton, where I'm from. By the way, I came to Bethany in 1956 and played basketball, baseball, and then played on a 1961 basketball team that went to the national tournament. And I see 3 of my teammates are on this list here. That was quite a team. Anyway, he said, let's go over to the gym and play some one-on-one. And I'd seen him play. He'd never seen me play. So I had a little advantage. We played for 90 minutes, and it was a knockdown, drag-out thing. Neither one of us would give up, and we finally both got tired. It was a few years after we'd played regularly. And he said, let's go home, and we argued a little bit who had won. But it was one of the most physical basketball times I ever had. He was something else. He told me that he learned so much his freshman year here when Jan Dobbins and Jim Schoenhoven were the starting guards. He was a freshman, and he played some that year, and the next year he was out of sight. He was so good, he could have played at a 4-year college easily. Anyway, he told me how much he learned from those two, and he thought that Dobbins and Schoenhoven, who unfortunately I think has passed away, should be in the hall before him. And Jan Dobbins is a guy from Indiana who is in the hall. Anyway, I wasn't going to say too much. I don't want to go on here and do a Dan Gladden thing and talk forever. But he was a good guy, and he became a better guy after he was here. He's had a good life. He's an Indiana guy. He talks with a drawl. If you think that Southern Indiana doesn't have a drawl, you'd have to listen. When he says we got 6 miles to go, he say we have 6 miles to go. He drops the S. So that's just a little bit about Jerry Binder. I do wish Bruno had been here so we could have asked him tonight if he thought Jerry missed those free throws on purpose, because Jerry swore that he didn't, and I kind of think that he did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luther. I will only add before I bring up Susan, I have been on the committee since the inception. We have never received more comments from teammates and friends and family members than we did for Jerry Binder. I mean, I think on our file we probably easily into the double digits, probably closer over to than probably 20, 24 comments, just individually people reaching out to us about putting Jerry into the Hall of Fame. So it's a very great honor tonight for us to be able to do that. To also make some comments on behalf of Jerry, we're going to bring up Susan Lepak.
Thank you. Good evening. I've known Jerry Binder for nearly 60 years, ever since he married my sister Sonia and thus joined the Dorr family in 1963. Despite the passage of time, geographical distance, and the changes that life throws our way, the Binder-Dorr family connection remains present and strong. And so when it became apparent a few weeks ago that Jerry's health challenges would keep him from being here in person tonight, which makes me cry, he asked that my brother Luther and I step in to represent him for Jerry and for his family, including his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all back home in the great basketball state of Indiana. We are honored to do so. I never had the chance to see Jerry play basketball at Bethany, but I knew he was a star. His teammates present here tonight could likely tell you the stories and rattle off the stats. So it's fitting that this Hall of Fame recognition has come Jerry's way. And while I could wish that Jerry were standing before you instead of me, it is my distinct privilege to share with you the letter of acceptance that Jerry wrote. And it's dated, I have to put my eyes on here, dated September 6. It says, Jake, my selection to the Bethany Hall of Fame is the greatest honor I have ever had. It was not expected and was an unbelievable surprise. I want to thank Bethany College as well as these people, Stephen Wenger, Larry Mason, Ted Teisty, Harvey Miller, Ron Young, and the best coach ever, Bruno Walensky. Thank you all. Then he goes on, my advice, get your education, enjoy college, and listen to your professors. Take what you learn and help other people every day. Open a door, carry a bag for someone, and you will get more out of it than they do. It took me 20 years after college to figure that out. Help someone today. And he closes, may God bless all of you, Jerry Binder.
Yeah, you sure? It's your floor, you bet.
No. I wanted to recognize Dean Brudwick, who I sat and watched him play and made many, many jump shots. And his son is going tonight. And I remember Dean was on a good team too and was a heck of a player. And one other thing that I thought as I walked through the old gym tonight, I was a senior when that gym came to fruition. And forever, I had the first basket ever in that gym. We had a prelim to a college game, and I got a layup. No big deal. But I remember that so much, so many memories. I was here so long ago. But I wanted to mention Dean. Thank you, sir.
Well, since we're acknowledging people, I'm going to throw one more in for you. The guy that just spoke to you was a first ballot election to the Minnesota Amateur Baseball Hall of Fame last week, Luther Dorr. Baseball player up at Princeton and Santiago, so north of the Twin Cities. But glad that both of you are here tonight and very appreciative of the thoughts you added on behalf of Jerry. Now we're going to move on to an individual from Roseville. Not Minnesota, no. Sacramento, California. How does a guy from near a suburban Sacramento, California, Roseville, California, end up here, not only just to play baseball, but if you look at the biography there, those statistical numbers are pretty good. And again, another indication why he's so deserving of being in here tonight. Let's hear from some people about how Kyle ended up here. And we'll bring him up, but first of all, we need to bring up the person who's going to introduce Kyle to the audience tonight, and that would be Julie Dushane.
I want to say hello. I'm Mom.
welcome. Hey, this is Mom, everybody.
Okay. My name is Julie Dushane, and I am the mother of Kyle Dushane. And I'm here to introduce him for Bethany's Baseball Hall of Fame. If you will allow me, I'd like to make one baseball pun, use one to say, right off the bat, I would like to thank Kyle's classmates, teammates, whoever gave him the nickname of Cali. This obviously for California, not very original, but you know, they were first-year college students, so what can you expect? Anyway, many years, Kyle had the nickname of Doo-Doo. Now, that sounds endearing, and obviously it's a play on our last name, Doo-Doo, Dushane. But, and it's fine when people say, nice hit, Doo-Doo, or go, Doo-Doo. But if he's not having a good game, or if the other team gets a hold of that nickname, it can, you know, not sound so good. The cleaned up version would be something like, hey, Doo-Doo, you're stinking up the place. And worse, you know, it could be a bad nickname. So I was glad to get rid of that. So thank you guys for that nickname. Kyle's sister Lisa was supposed to be here tonight, but she didn't make it. But that would have been taking a big chance to have her introduce him, because you know how sibling relationships can go. And it might have been, you know, talk about how Kyle gave her a black eye, or once when he and a friend were out in the garage playing darts, she somehow got impaled with a metal pointed dart in her thigh and came screaming into the house. Well, I would have thought it would just be fair if Lisa could come in here and, you know, settle the score with Kyle, or even the score. By the way, that's not a baseball pun, it's just a general sports pun. So I'm not using a bunch of baseball puns. I don't want to be, you know, too predictable about this. But anyway, you're getting me to introduce him, and please forgive senior moments or whatever. I might miss some things. I digress. Baseball. Kyle first showed some real talent for the sport when he was about 6 or 7 years old. While many kids that age were chasing butterflies in the outfield or digging dirt in the infield, Kyle, my hyper-focused kid when it came to baseball acumen, made unassisted triple play. That was a proud mama moment for me, but I don't even think the coach even knew what happened, because, you know, he was too busy scolding the kids that were chasing butterflies or whatever they were doing. So I had my proud mama moment, and Kyle, of course, knew what happened, and the umpire made the right call. And Kyle, you know, makes a beeline for the dugout, and then he waited there patiently to explain to all the other kids and the coach, I think, what had just happened. So that's when I knew he had some baseball knowledge. Kyle's baseball career started when he was a toddler. That's why I'm taking lots of credit for this, is we were in West Texas, and if we weren't chasing prairie dogs, you know, something you normally would do at 2 years old and you're in West Texas, and with Dad at work, just the two of us, if you asked Kyle what he wanted to do, it was always play baseball, play baseball. So I think that's why I have a rotator cuff injury now, even with pitching wiffle ball because it was so many pitches. He just wanted to keep trying to hit him out to the alley behind our house. So I blame him for that, but that's why I'm taking some of his credit for tonight's award. And so from backyard baseball in Texas, and then we moved back to California, and so from there it was T-ball to Little League, to the Little League Western Regionals in Southern California, to Pony League, to high school, to American Legion games, to an All-Star Optimist game. These were big deals. And then to Bethany, and then to church leagues, and now to this Hall of Fame. It's been an adventure. Thank you, BLC, for your commitment to emphasizing the one thing needful for students, and it's not baseball, the one thing needful for students during their time here on campus and for their future. Larry and I, as parents, were happy to find through, I think there were 5 relatives, Kyle, that went to Bethany before you, 5 of our, okay. Well, Dave Schneider and Dan and Steve Schneider and my sister Lori and my brother Gary have all been through Bethany. So that's how, were you going to explain that, Kyle? Or, oh, I just did. That's how we found this gem of a school. Larry and I were very happy to have Kyle come here to begin his college education. And any accomplishments of his that have gotten him into the Bethany Hall of Fame, to God be the glory. Here's my son Kyle, also known to some of you as Callie. Thank you.
Come on up.
Oh, man.
I'm not going to hug you, but I'll shake your hand.
All right.
We'll just leave that right there for you. The floor is yours.
Great. Wow. Well, this I would practice looking straight forward, so this is already kind of throwing me off here, going left and right. But thanks, Mom, for that introduction. I know that you had asked a little bit of insight for what to say, and I was not expecting to bring out my high school nickname, and it's still stitched on my glove somewhere. So that's still the glove I use with my kids and stuff today. So I do appreciate both my high school nickname as well as my college nickname that is stuck with a number of folks too. So, but first of all, before we get too far into this, I want to thank all the winners and the recipients tonight. I mean, this is a great crowd. I know a lot of family and friends that traveled a long ways. I mean, I have my family here from California. I got some cousins and aunts and uncles in town from Watertown, Wisconsin, and friends down here from Duluth. So thank you for bringing the time, coming a long ways, and making the arrangements to come tonight. It's very, very humbling. I want to thank the Bethany Athletic Department and the selection committee for finding me worthy of such an honor. It had been a little while since I really had been in the baseball world until my kids started playing. So to kind of come back and bring up all these memories has been a great opportunity to look back and remember all the great times here. So so before I get going too far, though, there are a few things I learned when I first came to Mankato about the Midwest that I want some folks that are from California to understand. There's some sayings and some certain things about the Midwest that really took me about a year to really understand, okay? So the first one's an easy one. So kids, if someone offers you a pop, they're not trying to give you bubble wrap. They're trying to give you a soda, okay? So I know some of you can appreciate that, but that took me a minute to get used to. I think, Josh, you still call it pop, man. You came to California and they looked at you funny when they offered you some. But the next one is more of a Wisconsin thing, but my buddy was kind of thirsty and was looking for the bubbler. And I don't know if I still understand it, but it is a way cooler way of saying drinking fountain. So, that's some good education. So this last one is a classic from Minnesota and the Midwest, and I never heard it before, but it's the magical hot dish, right? This was something I never knew of in California, you know. Casserole, cool, one thing, but hot dish, right? Tater tots, cream of corn, cheese, and then you could have discussions about whatever else you put in it. But, you know, the girl I dated in college, I knew I was kind of accepted when her mom served me a hot dish. That was pretty special thing, so. But now that you guys, you know, a couple California folks here learn a few things, I think there's a few things about California that everybody here should be educated on in case you ever go, especially to the Bay Area. There's some sayings, some things you're going to want to know. So this first one is going to sound like a borderline swear word, but it's simply the word hella. And all it means is really or a lot. Like, Dusty, your wife makes great cupcakes. You gave me some, and they look hella good, dude. So I can't wait to enjoy those. So when you go to the Bay Area, make sure you use that term. The next one comes straight from the streets of Oakland, and I'm an Oakland A's fan. So if and whenever, maybe someday they'll win the World Series again, we have to go hyphy, right? This is just a term from the rap community of Oakland about going crazy, right? And I think you guys all know a little bit about my history in dancing, and I think we'll save that everybody's from doing that. But this last phrase, especially for you folks in Minnesota, this is something you may not have ever heard before, so pay attention. It's called Super Bowl champions, all right? Okay. So the last time I was able to say it was when I was 11, so I can't brag too much. So I guess some of you cheeseheads may have a little bit over us at this point, but that's just something to keep in mind for the future. But now that we understand each other a little bit better, you know, the question was asked, how did a kid from California end up in southern Minnesota playing some baseball in literally the snow, never having worn batting gloves before in my life, and then having to wear them just to feel my fingers. So we got to go back to the beginning. As my mom kind of alluded to, my brain was simply wired to play baseball, right? I dabbled in basketball, a little bit of soccer here and there, but I never felt more comfortable in my skin than with a baseball bat in my hand and some cleats on my feet. So, you know, even in those other sports, I was always thinking about baseball. You know, I was watching highlights. I'd beg my parents to let me stay up and just watch the local news highlights of baseball. It was just in my brain. But that ultimately brought me here, standing before you today, but it wouldn't be without the people in my life that were there from the beginning and then throughout all my high school and college years as well. So, Mom, you just met my wonderful mom, and I'm so thankful she was able to attend this weekend and meet some of my friends and teammates. I mean, after having seen almost every game I played from ages 4 to 18, I imagine it was incredibly difficult for her not to see my seasons at Bethany. She was my first batting practice coach for endless hours of wiffle ball, as she identified. She drove me to every practice, games every day for many years, pre-treated and cleaned every grass stain. I'm sure you dream about those still. You sewed and stitched up every ripped knee, kept score at all my Little League games, and was the head scorekeeper for our whole league, committing even more time than just my games alone. But even more importantly was her voice always reminding me to stay humble and understand that baseball was simply a tool that God had given me to succeed in even bigger things. But that is something, kids, you know, you just don't really understand until much later, often after all the games are done, and I can admit that I'm kind of at that point, that coming to realize that now, you know, baseball is wonderful. It's a mirror of life, but is also just a tool. So thank you, Mom. I love you very much. Thank you. Unfortunately, my dad was unable to attend this weekend, but hopefully he's at home watching or in the future watching on YouTube. So all you guys videoing over there, you could probably just watch the YouTube, you know, I'm just telling you. So my dad was a kind and hard-working retail man and spent most of my baseball years working his butt off just to save money so my sisters and I could have a good education, a quality baseball glove, and a new bat each season. And I'm convinced he got a job at Sport Mart when we were young just for that sweet employee discount to get those new bats. He also learned all the tricks, how to send a baseball bat back to the maker like right under the deadline to get a brand new bat before the next year. He really learned that. And so I'm sure guys can relate, right? You get that dent like at 11 months and the warranty was 12. You get that new bat. Yeah, he was the guy to do that. So in my later years, he was an assistant coach for a few teams, was always available to play catch. And even today, he and my mom attend many of my kids' sports and activities. But now he gets to just watch and be grandpa, right? Or pop as we call him. So love you, Dad. Thank you very much. My sisters, who are not weren't able to attend here, but thank you for always putting on a brave face and getting dragged to game after game, tournament after tournament. My sister Lisa was quite the athlete herself, playing softball and basketball. My baby sister Ellen was the golfer of the family. So growing up fairly spaced out in age, my youngest sister is 12 years younger than me. Sports has always kind of been the bridge between us that has brought us together in addition to our faith. So I love you both very much and thank you. So my high school years of baseball with this core group of family is really where my love and talent flourished for baseball. I had the great coaching of Coach Kelly Mayo at Wood Creek High School in Roseville, California, not too far from where I live today. If my kids go to the school they were slated for, my high school will actually be their #1 competitor, so it's kind of fun to think about that. My first day of freshman spring practice, I run out into the JV field ready to go, put my bag down, and I hear this voice, "Dushane, you're on the wrong field." And I look around, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's my name, but no one told me that I'm supposed to be up there. So I grab my bag, I run over to the field, and I'm looking at these, I'm a skinny little 14-year-old kid looking at these grown men, adults, 17, 18 years old with full beards. I don't think I can still grow a beard. And I wasn't sure what I had gotten myself into. But apparently he knew what he was doing because I went on to set the school record at that time for career at-bats and innings played at Wood Creek High School. Coach Mayo saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And I'm forever grateful for him instilling the fundamentals, confidence, and courage within my soul to succeed both on the field and in life. So early in 2001, I was a little torn on college options. I was a talented baseball player in a highly competitive part of Northern California. So while I had some low-level interests from local colleges, no school really wanted another 5'8", 175 foot-pounds at the time, middle infielder with average speed. I think it's even in the book. I only stole 4 bases my whole time here at Bethany. So ultimately, I would have had to walk on at a team and beat out 75 to 100 other guys to probably sit on the bench for 3 years and maybe get a chance to play my senior year. So that was kind of frustrating. Other guys from my high school team were getting the phone calls. I had a couple of good buddies play at some D1 schools, and I was so happy for them. It was amazing. But I just wanted to play, right? I didn't care at the time like what the name was, whatever like that. So I really have to thank my mom and my Aunt Lori. Were like, hey, why don't you give Bethany a shot? And I feel like I knew a little bit about the school. My aunt and uncles had come here. My cousins were at the school at the time. I had some family in Wisconsin. I was like, why not? So my aunt dragged me out here reluctantly in February to come to Bethany and come check it out. So on that trip, I had a little mini tryout in the gym with Coach Woodley at the time. And we played a little catch, hit off the tee, had a little batting practice. Like, so Coach, what do you think? And he's like, I don't know if you're going to make it out here, so we'll see. So I went back a little disheartened, a little cold. But over the rest of my senior year in high school, we recorded games on that old compact VHS player. Sent Coach some film of me hitting a couple bombs, making a couple diving plays. And he had to like what he saw because we edited it like an early 2000s Dude Perfect video. It was just awesome. So ultimately, he gave me a call later in the spring and said if I'd be willing to play third base, he had a spot on the team and a chance to start my freshman year, which, just sounded wonderful. I just wanted to play. So the confidence with which he conveyed that message led me to my decision right then and there. It was an 80-degree bluebird day in California. I didn't bother to check that. It was only 29 and sleet in Mankato. So that was a benefit, I guess, at the time for not having the weather at your fingertips 24/7. So then it comes on to the college years, and really this is probably this is where I took a lot of time to really think about, what I want to say about these great guys over here. But ultimately I showed up in Mankato in early September 2001 and began my college career on my own. I knew no one, right? I had a couple friends, couple cousins in the area, but I figured no better way to start than go around, find some ball players, and let's go play some catch out on the field. It wasn't long before I got to know some of the best teammates and friends a guy could have, which led many of us to back-to-back regional championships and a lot of great memories along the way, especially our freshman year. I mean, we started 0-4, 3-7 in our first 10 games, and then we finished the season 13-1 in our last 3 weeks and dominated our games in the regional tournament. That was so much fun. For me personally, during that time, those 3 weeks, I was on an absolute heater, and the ball just looked like a balloon. Every baseball player can understand they just get in that zone for a few weeks, and it's just like, nothing's getting past you. And it was just those are some of like the most vivid parts of my time here. Although my performance memories are so vivid, the best part of a winning streak, as every sports team member will know, is sharing it with great teammates who ultimately end up as brothers, even when you're 2,000 miles away. So I got a few folks I want to recognize. Can't do all, 28 that I figured were on my teams, but the first I want to recognize is my sophomore roommate and co-captain and now fellow Hall of Fame inductee, Tony Lane, who is here tonight. TL was the epitome of smooth, right? In the field, at the plate, he was tall and athletic with that sweet mop of hair. Whew! So, of course, he was also smooth with the ladies. While I may have been quiet, we were both quiet captains on this team, I led with some fundamentals and pregame rap music, and Tony just led with that smooth, cool confidence that every baseball player you want to look up to. He was the kind of a guy that you would look at and say, we're going to win this game even if you were down a little bit. So it's fitting for me to be inducted a year after him because for 2 years, I was able to watch his talent from the best seat in the house, the on-deck circle. This guy was always on base, and it's a lot easier to hit when someone's on base. So, Tony, a pleasure joining you. Next was a good buddy of mine, even after Bethany, Mitch Knockreiner. He was an amazing athlete and a great ball player, but he was an ultimate utility player and brought a lot of sense of humor to our freshman season. He played third base a few times, and there was no one better that I would like to share some fielding drills with during that time. Josh Ando Anderson, Osceo's finest. There he is down there, new dad. Congratulations. Josh is a great friend of mine, especially when I first arrived in Minnesota. Like I said, I knew no one, but his family welcomed me in like a lost puppy on weekends sometimes, and it was a great chance. So thanks, Josh. You're a great ball player, and he would always swing hard just in case he hit it, and he could cover some ground in the outfield. So Josh, pleasure, man, playing with you. Andy Stolt, he was a great pitcher, kind of a fun guy, kind of goofy sometimes, This dude was lights out. Our sophomore year, he's just a beast on the mound, and you needed a microscope to see his ERA that season. Funny story, my sophomore year, I didn't realize it was going on, and I kind of asked, hey, has anybody got any hits? And everybody got mad at me. I almost jinxed his no-hitter. But he got it done, and I'm glad we could celebrate with the Wendy's Frosties with some of the volleyball girls the next week. Corey Green was a good buddy of mine, one of my first true friends in Minnesota that freshman year. But that's mostly because his girlfriend had a cute sister, and I was trying to get a date, So Corey was a great buddy of mine as well. Dusty Pokey Reese. Pokey, man, you're the most gangsta country boy I know. Yeah, see? You still got it. Oh, man. We taught you how to sea walk. I bet they just go wild for that in Iowa still, don't they? Yeah, I know they do. Oh, man. But Dusty, we spent a lot of time together our sophomore year, mainly because we dated girls in the same dorm. So we walked those stairs down there a lot of times together, man. So they got a lot of good memories. Good times, my man. So there was a common theme a little bit with some of these, with dating some of the girls, going on dates and stuff like that. So it kind of brings me to Jake. Just kidding, I'm not going to go with that, Jake. But Jake Creer, as most of you already know, is the director of alumni relations for Bethany. He's a guy always hitting you up for some cash, but I guess it's going to be you now. So, that's going to be you. But you wouldn't know it by Jake's career choice, but he was one of the most competitive, intense people on the baseball field that I ever had the chance to play in with. He made everybody better, right? He made that intensity, brought a little bit of that intensity to the game. So I had a great time playing with Jake and seeing some of his speed on the baseball field. Brandon Mullet Reinarts. He and I think, are still trying to catch up on sleep after having 6:30 a.m. physics classes with Professor Keir, and I'm sure that's part of our issues with our hair loss, is still trying to catch up on those 6 a.m. classes. So when Professor Keir suddenly passed away a few years back, as I'm sure many of you know, those cold walks to class and shooting potato guns with Mullet were some of my first thoughts and memories. So Mullet was a great buddy of mine. Peter Costello, who's here tonight, he too was in those physics classes with us, and he was the only teammate who got excited about calculus and differential equations on the bus at 2 a.m. doing homework on the way home from games. Peter, thank you so much. We had a great time snowboarding out there at Mount Cato. I took my kids out there today. He and I were both snowboard instructors out there, which Coach absolutely hated that we would snowboard right before baseball season. So I waited till after Bethany to break my pelvis snowboarding. So Peter, good times. Jesse Lupus Hackenmiller. All you need to know about Lupus, and he'll tell you, he was the only player to successfully steal a base off of Joe Mauer in high school, boy. But he brought that base stealing ability to Bethany Lutheran College and probably won us a lot of games by being a threat out there. So Lupus, Thanks for playing with me, man. Kelly Krasmarzik, he was the coolest dude on the field my freshman year. He was rocking that flat bill before it was a thing. Man, it was fun playing against him because I had Tony batting in front of me, Kelly batting behind me. Yeah, my job was easy. I got a lot of fastballs. I don't know about you guys, but Drew Van Looy, he's here tonight. Thank you for coordinating some of the festivities that we're joining in this evening. But I had only heard rumors of big country pitchers like him in California, and he was intimidating on the mound, and I'm glad that I was in the field when he was pitching and not batting against him. It was a lot of fun to watch and great joy to have. Coach Croaks Craig is still coaching here. At the time, though, he was our pitching coach, and I would have been really in trouble if we needed me to pitch. But he was a great balance of intensity, fundamentals, and fun. Still is today. He's a guy who fights for his guys. It's clearly evident with the trust that BLC puts in him as the head coach here still today and assistant AD at this point. So, Coach, thank you. It's always nice to, with a few times that I've come back, to come say hello, grab a T-shirt, and stuff like that. Couple last guys that aren't able to make it, but they were able to join us here before for a little bit. But Jamie Mulvihill, he played first base for us, and he was an easy target to throw to over there from third base. Corey Vogel, Vogies was a nickname creator. I think he almost made everybody's nickname on the team, but he started shortstop, and it was just fun being next to him playing third base because he always kept it light, lots of jokes and all that stuff. And lastly, I had Jake Jenigas, who joined us here before. While Drew would hit you with the power pitching, Jake would pick you apart, hitting all those corners, keeping that ball low and working that bottom half like a pro. So while I could go on and on, I'm running short on time. I know everybody's anxious to keep this moving. So I just want to say thank you to my other teammates, Tom, Darren, Andy, Ryan, KC, Adam, Andrew, Lawler, Mears, Brad, Matt, Darren, John, and of course, Coach Woodley. With a schedule that included endless doubleheaders, no time to recover from injuries, we needed everybody to contribute, and we all did. This is truly how a good team was built, like putting us in close proximity. You go through some pain, through some struggles, and then you come out together as brothers. So this award really belongs to all of us. So I can't thank you all enough, especially being for a California kid coming back here. So in closing, a few minutes really isn't enough to recognize and thank everyone who poured into my life and supported my growth, not only as a baseball player, but especially as a redeemed child of God through Christ. While I may not have realized it at the time, 2 years at Bethany was a path formed by God, and I can't thank him enough for the memories, relationships, and personal growth that experience fostered. Due to some physical health issues, my playing days are long behind me, but my passion for serving God and his plans through baseball and sports is not diminished. I accept this award with gratitude and humility in my heart, just as so many family members, coaches, and teammates did for me. I want to instill that same love and grace into my children and the next generation of players, no matter what the sport or activity. Lastly, I want to say thank you to my wife, Greta, and my kids who are here tonight. She never knew me as a baseball player, but has listened to my old baseball stories over and over and has learned to support my desire to pour all into our children's sports and activities. Hopefully this trip has given you the taste of how important my time was at Bethany, why baseball in particular is so life-giving, and to my kids, Logan, Miles, and Molly, might be running around yelling back there. I love you all, and whether in sports or dance, theater, or music, I will always be your biggest fan, and you're already on the wall in my Hall of Fame. Thank you again to everybody for coming tonight, and may God bless you all. Thank you.
I do have to admit, look at that. That's awesome. For those of you on this side, Kyle didn't even get 2 rows back here, and his kids came to greet him with a hug, so a pretty cool moment there. Kyle's the type of guy, actually, our team, probably about 5-6 years ago during spring break when we're down in Tucson, all of a sudden I looked down the first base line and was like, I know that guy, and here's Kyle. Comes down to watch our team. He was in town, I think, doing some business that day, Kyle, and you took time out of your schedule to come and watch our team play in Tucson. So that was a cool moment, but I got to tell you, Julie, to sit next to our president and have a mom from California insert the one thing needful into your speech is extremely powerful, and he's nodding again. That's for all of us here at Bethany, when we hear that message articulated so importantly, it's pretty special. So we talked about Indiana, a little bit of California. Bethany has always been this amazing ability, and through some really diligent recruiting is tough. It was tough back when Jerald Binder came with Bruno. It was tough during the junior college years that we have all these banners from in the 80s and 90s as well. And so our coaches go out a long way to try to find talented athletes, and then every now and then they don't have to venture too far. And that's the segue into our next guest, who the first time I ever saw Bruds play actually was before Bethany. You were a key cog in taking Mankato East to the state tournament your senior year in high school and met up with a pretty talented team from, I think, St. Paul Central at state quarterfinals that day up at St. Paul Civic Center and stuff like that. But we're going to be talking about a guy who, when you talk about smooth athletes, this guy right here, both not only in the baseball field but on the basketball court as well, really, again, as I mentioned before, was the epitome of making his teammates better and a pretty talented athlete in his own right. So to talk about Jeff Brudwick, let's bring up his baseball coach, Art Westphal.
Thanks, Don. I thought I was supposed to introduce Jeff, but evidently you decided you would.
It was only a matter of time before he got his first shot in, so don't worry about it.
How do you follow a mom? You know, I mean, a coach following a mom is not a good thing. By the way, Kyle, that workout with Coach Woodley, it was an NJCA violation. And we're going to have to go back and take a look at that. Luther, the 1959 floor that you mentioned is still in use today. President Pfeiffer talked about the project that we have going on now. We're hoping to replace that. So you played on in 1959, scored the first basket, and it's still there, and we still use it. So it's also great to hear that there's some people here from Watertown, and I also know there's some people from Sun Prairie here. So we have some Packer fans here. I'm glad to hear somebody else alluded to that. Oh, that didn't, evidently it's not that much of a Packer fan, and there's not much of a reaction. I want to add my congratulations to all the inductees tonight. I've been very fortunate to be involved with this from the beginning. I was part of the committee that actually put it together. I figured at that time it was the only way that I would ever have a chance to get in. So we started it. And it's amazing to me, and Kyle, you just demonstrated it. I've been able to observe the emotion involved with, all of us are here tonight because we're involved or we're a fan or at some sort of level with athletics. And to see and what I've been able to witness over the years of the emotion that's involved with camaraderie of your team and those kinds of things. It's pretty special. It also reminds me of the special relationship that between player and player and between coach and player. And again, all of us that have been involved with that kind of thing clearly understand how really special that is. And that's really what this evening is about. And it's, you know, when I first started doing this, I didn't need these. I get to introduce two guys tonight. It's really an honor to introduce both Jeff and Lee. And ironically, Jeff was on the very first team that I coached here at Bethany when we restarted baseball, and Lee was on the very last team. So it's kind of neat for me to see that kind of gamut here, and then see Kyle kind of in the middle, and the tradition that the baseball program has had here for a long time. They both have really common traits. You know, they're leaders. Their work ethic is amazing. They're humble. Don alluded to that. They're referred to as ultimate teammates, but they're really quite different people. Jeff is really kind of laid back, and Lee's a little more excitable. And so, again, that's the great thing about athletics, in that personalities blend. You have a guy from California come in and play with guys from the Midwest, and it works because of athletics and the relationships. These two guys are both people that, in our mind's eye, when we think of athletes at Bethany and what they should look like, are certainly, they fit that to a T. I've really appreciated, they've both stayed in contact with me over the years, and it's always fun to hear. And so it really is an honor for me to introduce Jeff initially first today. And Jeff I think in many ways, coaching, timing is the key. So when I was brought back and hired to come back to Bethany and restart the baseball program, the timing with a guy like Jeff Brudwick and the guy, Jeff really came here to play basketball. I wish I could take credit for recruiting him, but I can't. He came here to play basketball, and we were talking earlier about the decision was made in the spring to play baseball, but he made the decision to play and play in an unknown program, no idea what was going on, and turned out to certainly be one of the better players that ever played here. And I've had the pleasure to coach Jeff. I've had the pleasure to have Jeff as my assistant coach. I've had the pleasure of umpiring with Jeff. So it's been a great relationship. And so Jeff being the first member of the kind of the new era baseball team, it's really pretty neat that this is also the first father-son induction that we've had here at Bethany, which is pretty neat. Believe it or not, I did not coach Dean. I did not coach his dad. But, you know, when you're starting a new program, credibility becomes essential. And so to have someone like Jeff Brudwick, who was the first Lions All-Star, high school All-Star, to come to Bethany and play, and as Don mentioned, was a key member in the Mankato East High School basketball team, and very visible in the Mankato circles and highly regarded as an athlete, literally gave almost instant credibility to our baseball program. And so I owe Jeff a great deal for that. You know, Ron Young was the basketball coach at that time, and I wasn't coaching basketball. And Ron asked me if I would scout our team, if I would scout Bethany and then give him a report, which I thought was really a great idea. So as I watched our team play, and I came back and I told Ron, if I were to coach against you, I would tell our guys to force Brudwick to the basket because he won't shoot the ball. He's going to pass the ball all the time. And that was just the way he was and is. Really, really unselfish. He had great offensive skills, but chose to get his teammates more involved. And he didn't need to score to be a really good player. Baseball story, and I think this is maybe the only time this has happened at Bethany. We were playing at Austin, and Jeff was on first base, and they tried to pick him off, and the ball went down the right field line, and he scored standing up from first base on an attempted pickoff play. I haven't seen that anywhere at any level, and that kind of gives you some sort of picture of what kind of athlete he was. You know, some things that you see in the program and that you hear, there's also some things kind of behind the scenes. So I reached out to some of Jeff's teammates and asked them, you know, kind of what they thought of Jeff. And let me just share. You know, coaches say things and coaches use cliches, but teammates really tell the story. So one of his teammates said, you know, whether you needed a big basket or a bunt put down, he executed the play and made it happen for the team. He performed with utmost confidence and was always someone you could count on in the clutch. In my opinion, he was the ultimate teammate. Now, teammates also don't always get along real well. One of his teammates wrote, I really didn't like hanging around with Bruds too much because he was too good looking and he took all the ladies' attention away from me and all the other guys, and he didn't even realize he was doing it. And then finally, one of his teammates said, you know, Jeff was quiet, very modest, but when it came to competing, he'd tear your heart out. So competitive, great athlete, but even a better person. Great teammate that always put the team first, a winner. So I think that sheds some things. But there's some things outside of Jeff's athletic ability, too. One of his teammates cited. He said, you know, Jeff was really someone that really didn't like to experiment when it came to eating. He thought maybe some other people had odd eating habits, but Jeff likes cereal, but you don't put the milk on it. You eat the cereal and then drink the milk. You know, baseball players are notorious, right, for always doing the same thing when things go well. And so some part of it was Jeff. Jeff loves hamburgers, French fries, and ketchup. That's it, nothing else. And a vegetable is good for Jeff if it's on somebody else's plate. Now, the other guy, he also said he was smooth as silk. Don already alluded to that. And I think every athlete, when you think of them, they have certain traits. When I think of Jeff, that's what I think of. I think of smooth. He never looked like he was running hard, but he was always way ahead of everybody else. Again, the sign of an athlete. You know, Jeff, as a sophomore, hit .383 here for us. He didn't hit very well as a freshman because he got some really bad coaching. Remember, we were working on hitting and extending, and after a period of time, I think Jeff was really trying to be respectful to me, and he said, you know, Coach, I can't do that. He'd had an injury. We're trying to get him to extend his elbow, and he couldn't because he'd had an injury. It was physically impossible for him to do it. So as soon as I left him alone and stopped coaching him, the next year he hit .383. There's a question here. There's a stat that says 18 for 18 in stolen bases. I have 19 for 19. That was in only 27 games. He led the team in hits, stolen bases, on-base percentage, fewest strikeouts, and most walks. He was all-state in the Minnesota Community College Conference, and he was our first all-region player. So in his career, he had 52 hits. In 52 games, he had 42 hits and scored 40 runs, was never thrown out trying to steal. And in the combined 2 years, he only had committed 9 errors. Sophomore year, he had 28 hits in 27 games, scored 29 runs. Pretty impressive. In basketball, he led his team in assists, and one of his teammates also takes credit for that. He talked about how unselfish Jeff was, but his teammates said, I told him that the girls like guys who dished out assists better than the scorers, so he'd pass it to me more. So again, he had a great relationship with his teammates. So not just an athlete. Easy to talk about athletic accomplishments on a night like this, but Jeff was very, very in tune academically. A rare art major that was a great athlete. And so I saw Bethany has purchased some of his things, have a great deal of respect for his ability in that. He liked to design uniforms. I am eternally grateful for the impact that Jeff has had both on our basketball program and in particular on the baseball program as we started. And I would say Lee and Kyle, Jeff kind of paved the way for you and the baseball program and the success that we still enjoy today. And, you know, we always talk in life about maybe leaving things better than they were when we came. Well, the first year we were 7-18 when Jeff came. The next year we were 18-7. He left it better than it was. Jeff, congratulations.
Put you on this side.
Okay.
We'll leave it here, and then you can take it. Oh, okay.
Thanks, Art. Brings back a lot of good memories for me. Excuse me. First, I'd like to thank the selection committee, for selecting me. It really meant a lot to me. I know when Don first called me, I was at work, and it was a real surprise. It wasn't anything that I had expected or anything, but I felt really honored to get that call. I'd like to thank my family who's here supporting me. They've always been there for me. I really appreciate it. My first introduction to Bethany was I was young. I was probably maybe 9 years old, and a college teammate of my dad called him and said he was going to come for the alumni game. Alumni games were always a big deal. So my dad took me to the game. I don't remember much about the game, but I remember being in the gym, and kind of starting to know about Bethany and what my dad had done. There was then a few years later, I met Joe Madsen. Joe was kind of a Bethany kid, I guess you'd say. His dad was a professor here. His mom worked at the library. All his brothers had played at Bethany. So, I mean, even his parents had a key to the gym, so every once in a while, when we were younger, Joe would get us into the gym. I assume that he had permission. I don't know, but he knew where the lights were up by the stage. You'd turn on half the lights, and we were able to shoot baskets there. And it's kind of when I started to follow Bethany basketball at that point. Ron Young was the coach at the time, and he had recruited just some really good players. This is probably like 79, 80 in that range, and just really great teams and a lot of fun to watch. They were up and down, and dunks, and that wasn't something that we saw at Mankato East in 1979 very much. So that was exciting, and I kind of at that point thought, this is probably where I want to come play basketball. I want to play for Ron Young. I want to play Bethany. It was also really neat. Halftime, I was there usually with Joe, and we'd go out into the lobby and smell that popcorn. That was always good. And right in the middle of the trophy case was the big trophy from the 1959 team that finished second in the nation. So I would look at that, and you'd see all the names down at the bottom. Right at the top, Captain Dean Brudwick. So I always pointed that out to Joe and to anybody that was there, so that they knew. So at that time, like Art said, there wasn't even baseball at Bethany, and my plan was to come here and play basketball, play for Ron, and so at some point, I just asked Art, because I didn't know when they decided they were gonna add baseball, and he said, yeah, it was in that spring, because I remember being excited because a good friend of mine, Troy Lingbeck, who was a high school baseball player, he was being recruited, and now he decided he was going to come to Bethany. So I ended up living with my two good friends from high school, Joe and Troy, and that just made my experience that much better. Art, were you on the last teams that had baseball before they dropped it? Or was I close?
I think it was 2 years after I left.
2 years. That's all right, yeah. That was about 1950 or so. Or somewhere. So, yeah.
I mentioned his sense of
but you look around at the campus now, and it's amazing. So much more things than when I went to school here. But I still feel really lucky that I went to Bethany when I did. A couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, I was on Ron Young's last basketball team, so I guess there's my influence there, right? So I always kind of think, maybe Ron hung on a couple extra years just so he could coach us, probably. And I got to play on Art's first team, and start the program here at Bethany, which was meant a lot to me at the time. I guess the main thing you think about, I don't really even remember any of the games or scores or anything like that. maybe a couple games that you remember, your first win for the program at Golden Valley. That was a big win. Or our first trip, that spring trip, we drove to Arkansas in a company-owned or a school-owned people mover, which I don't know if you know what people mover is, but I think the seats were padded, but they didn't recline, and that's a long trip. That's a long trip to Arkansas with a bunch of guys, but we were happy when we got there. It was warm. Probably the first time we'd been outside after being in the gym, for all that time. So, those are the kinds of things that you remember is the friendships that you meet and the situations that you're involved with. I mean, I was lucky at the time to be able to play two sports, and I think now I don't even know if it's if they can do that now. It's just such a time commitment for the kids, the off-season programs and that kind of thing. It's just a lot harder than it used to be. That was a chance for me to make different friends, friendship relationships with two different groups. So that was very important and a big part of my experience at Bethany. All my experiences at Bethany were all positive. It was really a joy to be here and just really feel lucky that I was able to come here, play with my friends, have great coaches. Art and Ron were I think there's maybe 3 guys that actually got to play 2 years for Ron and 2 years for Art, and that was me, Joe Madsen, and Todd Dufault, who were both basketball, baseball players. So pretty lucky for that. I guess I just want to reiterate, a thank you to the committee for selecting me. I feel really honored, and it's something that I'll always be, very proud of. So, thank you.
We brought recruiting a little bit closer to home, obviously, with Jeff Brudwick. There's been another traditionally exceptionally strong recruiting base for our coaches over the years, and that's this little thing called the Minnesota River Conference. Now, at one time included Mankato Loyola here, and it went all the way up to Jordan. Right in the middle of that drive up 169, I found a wife in Belle Plaine, but Lynette Bernardy found a lot of athletes. And a lot of talented athletes that their success, if you go into the lobby of the Sports and Fitness Center, you will see a number of banners of championship teams in volleyball and softball. And the player we're going to talk about right now was a huge contributor to that. Again, as I mentioned off the top, because of her position, the statistics, it's one of those things that might get away from me, but when you dive into the nuances of the sport and what Jodi Fahrenkamp brought to us as far as the talented athlete that she was is just a tremendous reason, again, why those championship banners exist up there. So to talk a little more about Jodi Fahrenkamp Foster, we're going to bring up her coach, Lynette Bernardy.
Thank you, Don. I also would like to start by congratulating all of the 2022 Hall of Fame inductees. It's a true privilege to share in this event as you are recognized and honored for your contributions to Bethany Athletics. I'm especially grateful and honored to be able to introduce you all to a most deserving two-sport athlete. I had the distinct privilege to coach them 24 years ago. Jodi Fahrenkamp Foster, let me be the first to officially congratulate you on being inducted into this year's Hall of Fame. What a true joy it was to welcome this fiery redhead onto Bethany's campus the fall of 1998. After a successful high school career with the Belle Plaine Tigers, Jodi fortunately chose to share her talents with the Bethany volleyball and softball teams. Jodi, you deserve this honor for so many reasons. I must say it was hard to compress them all into just a few short minutes. As I continue to reminisce about your contributions and influence during your time here at Bethany, it seemed that a recurring theme was evident. The word that kept coming to mind to describe Jodi was fearless. Simply put, free from fear. In my experience, and generally speaking, when a freshman player steps on the court for the first time, there are some signs of insecurity, some anxiety, some jitters. Not true for Jodi. What I saw starting day one was a confident, courageous, brave, and gutsy athlete. She wasn't the tallest or quickest player on the volleyball team, and she didn't have the best vertical jump. But because of her, the 1998 and 99 volleyball teams enjoyed the success that they did. Jodi was our defensive specialist, and she played back row only. For anyone who's watched volleyball, I think it's safe to say that fans and onlookers alike enjoy that big kill from the front row attacker. And if truth be told, most game highlights and stats seem to focus on the big offensive or defensive play at the net. What often goes unnoticed, however, and underappreciated, is the level of athleticism, game knowledge, skill, anticipation, reading the opposing hitter, reading the teammate's block. I could go on and on. All of these factors and more go into back row play. Jodi was fearless in that back row. She owned it. From serve receive to digging up that impossible pass, she refused to let any ball she could reach hit the floor, even if it meant sacrificing her body, and believe me, she had the bruises to prove it. I remember on more than one occasion I turned to the assistant coach and I could only utter the word unbelievable. How does she do that? She could turn what would be an impossible dig for most into a pass to set up for the kill. Jodi's offensive skills took shape at the service line. She could place her serve anywhere and knew which opposing players in serve receive to target. Many of her serves resulted in an ace or forced the opposing team to send over a free ball. In my opinion, she was one of the best servers to grace the Bethany volleyball court. I think it's important to note here, Jodi's fearless back row play earned her first team all-division her sophomore year. To be clear, that was no small feat. Defensive specialists, and in Jodi's case, she only played 3 rotations and then had to come out for 3. So she's only playing half the game. Defensive specialists had to be exceptional contributors to the team's success in order to get that kind of recognition back in the day. Jodi's contributions to the success of the 99-2000 softball teams fall right in line with those recognized on the volleyball court. She was one of, if not the most gutsy third baseman I had the privilege to coach. And I see one of her teammates and her mom nodding their head. She was a master strategist and would position herself on the field to create the best defensive advantage. That might mean playing up in the hitter's face in anticipation of a bunt or hugging the third baseline for a screaming line shot. And that just describes a fraction of her contributions on the field. As a hitter and base runner, she challenged opposing teams each and every time she stepped up to the plate. When Jodi got on base, she forced the entire defense to be on high alert. Let's just say she generated more than a few runs due to her aggressive play on the base paths. Once again, fearless. I would be remiss if I didn't express some other very important traits that Jodi shared with not only her family, but with me and her teammates. She was a natural, selfless leader. The moment competition started, Jodi put on this game face that was impossible to penetrate. Her teammates and I looked up to her for strength, perseverance, and unwavering consistency. I'm going to do my best to get through this. I believe Jodi's fearless courage was best exemplified in late November of 1998. Not long after Jodi's freshman volleyball season ended, she was faced with tremendous loss in the passing of her father, Jerald. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you, Jodi, but your attitude, relentless determination, and tremendous fortitude carried you through some very tough times and allowed you to excel in the classroom and lead both the volleyball and softball teams to very successful seasons. I am so very confident that your parents, Jerald and Arliss, both of whom have been called home to their Heavenly Father, would be so very proud of you. Not just for the honor you are receiving tonight, but for the life you have created for yourself and your family in their absence. They were your biggest fans and no doubt played a huge role in molding you into the person that you are today. Jodi, there is no question in my mind that you were one of the most fearless student athletes I had the honor and privilege to coach. The work ethic, courage, and fortitude you displayed on and off the playing field was noticed and respected by all who knew you, and proved to be a direct reflection of your character that you so graciously shared with Bethany some 20+ years ago. Thank you for making the decision to attend Bethany Lutheran College. I, along with the institution, would like to express deep gratitude for the commitment and contributions you made during your time here. And on a personal note, and I'm guessing that your husband and beautiful daughters would agree, you are an extraordinary, unique, strong, and independent individual, and I am beyond blessed to have had the opportunity to share in your experiences while at Bethany. Thank you for believing in me. It truly was amazing and memorable to serve as your coach. Finally, I pray that God richly bless you in all things. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce 2022 Bethany Lutheran College Athletic Hall of Fame inductee Jodi Fahrenkamp Foster.
It was 20-some years ago when I took my first public speaking class here at Bethany. I don't think I did so well, so bear with me. First of all, before I forget, sincere congratulations to everyone else that was inducted here today. Very well deserved. Congratulations to you. And big thank you to the Hall of Fame committee for electing me. It really is a huge honor. I'll never forget the morning, actually, of May 17th. I was in Vegas with my friend Michelle. I got the voicemail from Don, and I'm like, I don't know why he's calling me. I don't know. Michelle, I'm going to see what's going on here. Called Don back, and he gave me the news. I instantly teared up. I was in complete, utter shock. This is quite the honor that I'm still, as you can tell, really shook up about still. But being in Vegas, it was pretty cool. I mean, that was definitely my lucky day, right? But on that roulette table wasn't so lucky. So
36
no, you owe me.
All right.
I can honestly never in my wildest dreams have thought that I would ever be standing up here today getting such an award. I don't, like it was mentioned, I don't have those amazing stats or awards to back me up like so many of the people here today do. And I wasn't the star of our teams, and I wasn't the most athletic either, just to be quite honest. So this honor is definitely a reflection of our teams, our teammates, our coaches. I mean, this is us that did this. But what I always did try to do when I was out on the court was live by the values my mom and dad instilled in me. And that was to always, always work as hard as I could, no matter what it was. do it 100%, and do the best I could with my God-given talents. So I'm very humbled with a recognition like this, especially in my case. So thank you, Coach, reaching out to me, a quiet green player out of Belle Plaine High School. I honestly didn't look at many colleges, but Bethany just seemed like the right fit for me, and it definitely proved to be true. For volleyball, I honestly only played 4 years of volleyball in my entire life prior to coming to Bethany. My freshman year of high school, I went into practice. I didn't even know what a setter was. So I tell you, I was clueless. But I did come from a very strong program in Belle Plaine. I learned a lot of things very quickly, and there was definitely a high standard that was expected out of that program. Coach may have said that I was fearless, but I will tell you what, I was one nervous Nelly when it came to coming to Bethany. I was in the midst of tons of 6-footers. I was in the company of some of the great MRC elite athletes. Alyssa Jensen here, one of Sibley's finest. Amy Schrader, who was Lesueur Henderson's best player at that time, who was actually inducted last year into the Bethany Hall of Fame. Her and I actually went on to Huron University together, and we were best known as the Bethany Twins because we played volleyball and softball together, and we were pretty much attached to the hip. So coming here, it was intimidating at first, but once we showed up here at campus, got practice rolling, that all went away. We were a team. It was more about the bonding, coming together, and making each other better. Each and every player on our teams had a key but different role. Coach Lynette did such an awesome job of bringing us together, whether it was a quick pregame or postgame prayer or just one of her inspirational speeches. She always reminded us the privilege it was to be a woman athlete playing college sports. Heard that many times. She always reminded us these days will not last forever, so cherish it for every second that there is, and to leave everything we had out there on the court or the field. She also always knew when we were at a point in a game, when it was time to polish that game off, or maybe we're taking a little bit too easy on a team. We got the sign. Twist the knife, let's get this done. We were a very strong volleyball team. Our conference competition, however, we were just reminiscing, wasn't so hot. I recall some faculty, might be in the present today, sort of doing a sideline pool or betting of how long our matches would actually last. Seeing the tap on the watch, come on. There were definitely times when I think we warmed up longer than we played in the actual game. But we did play a lot of other good competition that really challenged us though in the long run. For me, softball was definitely more my sport. I started playing catch with my dad in our front yard when I was young. That's still a moment that I really cherish right now to this day. I wasn't a very polished softball player though when I got here. I don't know if Coach remembers this, but she really broke down my throw and my swing. There were weeks of frustrations and tears that came. It was all really worth it. Coach invested in me. She even taught me she flipped me to the left-hand side every once in a while. She taught me how to drag bunt, slap bunt from the left-hand side, which I utilized here at Bethany, but I carried on to Huron as well. Again, here we had softball, we had some amazing talent. Sheila Hansen, Maple River's finest there. I think my freshman year, Sheila probably caught almost every inning of our season, pretty darn close. She was phenomenal. For me though, I have to say, I think I enjoyed practices almost the most. I remember Coach just hammering ground balls at us. And the one time we were just on and she was trying, like the Dickens, to get that ball past us. There were so many nicknames that came up in that practice, and I just remember the smiles and the amount of fun we were having. At the time, back those 24 years ago, Coach, we were just talking about this tonight. When you're in the moment, you feel like that success on the court and the field seems so important. And I know we had amazing games and plays. However, now, 24 years later, I hate saying that, it isn't the wins or the stats or the plays that I remember. It's the relationships that we had, how it made me feel. I felt and still feel very proud to be a Bethany Viking. I remember the great times we had in LA, those spring trainings. I remember going to the beach when it was 60 degrees in shorts and having the homeless person on the pier calling us crazy. For volleyball, our sophomore year, going to that district tournament where we were just so close to going to that national tournament. Lots of tears, but yet what I remember most is that anticipation of going. You were there, Don. We went to a hockey game. You know, athletics here, it wasn't just about the success or anything like that and the wins. It was about experiences, growing as an athlete and a person alike, and building those relationships. Volleyball and softball obviously were a huge part of my Bethany experience. However, it was so much more than that. Like Coach mentioned, in the fall of '98 is when I knew Bethany was more than just a school to me, and that the people here were more than just my coaches, professors, and teammates. They were my family. That fall, after my freshman season of volleyball, I lost my dad. He was by far my biggest supporter and my best friend. I was devastated. But to see all of my volleyball teammates, my coach, so many professors and other staff that came to his funeral, it meant so much to me, to say the least. That support continued throughout my time at Bethany. I had teammates that I became so close to, and their parents felt like family. Sheila and I spent a lot of time together. Bonnie, who is here today, and Denny, they invited me on their family vacations to Florida and Missouri. We had so much fun together. Throughout it all, though, however, definitely my biggest supporter was my mom. Throughout it all, she was there. She put thousands of miles on that conversion van of hers with her and her friend Joyce, including that long hike to Arizona, which was quite the adventure for them when they broke down. She has since passed away as well, but I do know, like Coach said, they are looking down on me, and they are smiling pretty big this evening. Lastly, I do need to give a big shout out to my husband, Jeff, my daughters, Kendall and Kaylin, and some of my very favorite people that followed me here today. I thank you, not only for being here tonight, but for the support and being there for me whenever I need you and making life fun. Thank you again for all this, for the recognition to the committee, for recognizing me in this way. I am sincerely humbled. Thank you.
Taking a bunch of volleyball players to a Phoenix Coyotes game with rental vans that dropped the transmission, and Lynette doesn't know where she's going, and I still don't know how we got through that night. All right. One more inductee this evening. Now, we talked earlier about Mr. Dorr and baseball and the tradition that they have up in the Princeton, Santiago area. Well, if you're down in southern Minnesota, there's one town that has a ton of baseball tradition, and our last representative is a native son of that area and was able to take his talents that he honed in the New Ulm area and the Sleepy Eye and that whole Tomahawk Conference at MVL and bring those here to Bethany and have a pretty outstanding career. So let's bring up, we'll talk about Lee Brandel, but in order to bring Lee to the podium to become a member of our Hall of Fame, we're going to bring up Art Westphal.
Jodi, I have to admit, that was me. That was me. And I mean, they talking about how good, they were really good. And so at that time, I have to share this story, okay? At that time, as members of the junior college conference here in Minnesota, all of our teams were limited to a certain number of competitions, whereas nationally teams were playing many more matches or games than we were allowed. In my humble opinion, it was a bit restrictive. So Lynette has this absolutely terrific volleyball team coming, and I'm thinking we need to try and get some better competition than we have in our conference, which Jodi alluded to. So I scheduled, not Lynette, it was me. I scheduled to bring Minneapolis Community College to play Bethany at, I'm going to say like 4 o'clock. And we were in our regular schedule to play Rochester at 6 o'clock. And I'm thinking we'll be done in 45 minutes. Minneapolis will be gone. Rochester will never know. And we get to play better competition in our non-conference game. Well, somehow Rochester shows up early, and it takes our girls an hour and 5 minutes to dispose of Minneapolis. And the Rochester coach goes crazy. I mean, I have never been called so many different things in my entire life. So she reports it to the conference commissioner. I go to the next conference meeting, and not Bethany, but I get put on probation for scheduling too many matches. In the meantime, our volleyball team plays great competition, and they go to the national tournament. It was worth it all. It was worth it all. So yeah, I was one of the people heading the pool of how long will this one take. And again, the point is that's how dominant they were. And again, just as Lynette said, I want to thank all the inductees tonight for what you've contributed to the athletic program here at Bethany. As a longtime athletic director, it means a great deal to us. So Lee Brandel, certainly last, but certainly not least. It's probably a bit hard to describe Lee and what he did for the baseball program here. But Lee was part of what I firmly believe, and I said this when one of his teammates was inducted, that it was the best recruiting class that I'd ever had. And that's certainly not to offend any of the other teams, but this was the only team that won back-to-back Minnesota Community College championships. As a two-year school, these are the guys that the only ones that ever did that. So as I recruited this group that I knew was really good, it also came to the point where I decided that I no longer could be the head coach here at Bethany. So I then proceeded to call all of them and say, I will stay on for the 2 years that you're here and be the assistant coach, which I did. It was probably 2 of the most fun years I ever had. And to attest again to the quality of this group, they were 53 and 23 in the 2 years that they were here. Went on to regional tournaments. They were really good. And Lee certainly was a key part of that. So as an assistant coach, I was the pitching coach. So we would be in the bullpens working on things, and we're working with pitchers on trying to do stuff, and inevitably the question would come up, well, I don't have great control on that. And I said, don't worry about it. Lee will get it. Lee will block it. It doesn't matter where you throw it. He's going to get it. You know, that's just the kind of player Lee was. And, you know, I remember watching Lee as a high school player, and he was one of those guys that his uniform was dirty after the first inning. And so baseball people, you know, you love those kind of people. And his, you know, I said before, every athlete I think kind of has a trait. Well, here's what I would say about Lee's trait. And the word competitive would come to my mind. And he wasn't just competitive against our opponents. He was competitive against his teammates, and he was competitive against himself. That internal competitiveness is the trait that by far, in my opinion, separated Lee from many of the players that we had here, and certainly many of our opponents. You know, Lee would be the proverbial guy that could run you over and then pick you up, and he'd make you feel good about it. I think that's a great description of the way Lee played and performed. Just so respectful. And I think the phrase that Lee kind of lived by when he was here, and I suspect he still does, is the more one puts in, the more one gets out. And if you would watch Lee, whether it was practice or a game, in fact, some guys, as a coach, you have to kind of gear up. With Lee, it was kind of sometimes having to gear him down. He would get almost too excited and intense to the point where maybe he just needed to relax a little bit. But it's a whole lot more fun as a coach trying to gear guys down than it is trying to gear them up. Any of us who have coached know that. When I think of Lee also, I think of the term student athlete. So he's an all-conference player here. He's on the dean's list. He graduates with high honors. He goes on after here to play Division II baseball at Concordia in St. Paul. He's an all-conference player in the Northern Sun, and he's an academic All-American. Student athlete. And it just, when you put those kinds of combinations together and the kind of people that you're working with, it's pretty easy to coach. I said Lee was one of those guys that made it easy to coach. And I in many ways, when I think of Lee, his teammates, again, there's always a story behind the story. So, to talk about his teammates, that group, we had lunch today, and that group, we've gotten together pretty consistently over the years, thanks to Cliff organizing. And that group today, they arrived at lunch. Some of them hadn't been back for 15 years, and it was like they had just walked out of the locker room together. And so you can still see. And so when I asked them to share something, I actually learned something today. So let me share the first comment. This guy says he remembers some of our first practices with many of the new players wanting to make a good impression on the coaches. So they were going to try and, we did this fun thing that the guys really looked forward to. It was called running poles. So baseball people understand it's like running from the right field foul pole to the left field foul pole. The guys look forward to it every day. And so what I found out today was that everybody geared off Lee and not trying to keep up with Lee because they couldn't, and they would wait, and Lee would actually lap them, so they would run less than Lee. Lee would run the full amount to the fullest, and then these guys would kind of follow Lee in maybe a couple pulls short of what was required. I remember the first early when Lee was a freshman, and we did this thing just to introduce people to baseball, and we did a 2-mile run. And we started, and here goes this freshman kid, zoom. And I looked at Coach Woodley, and I said, he's not going to make it. He kept that pace literally the entire way, and I think at that point we knew we had something special. So one of his other teammates said, Lee was one of the first people I met when I came to Bethany. He was an instant friend. He was kind. He was generous, extremely positive, just an overall great person. Baseball was just one of the many things he was great at. His strong faith and determination was contagious, and it was with Lee for sure. He was a blessing to all of us. And one of the players, kind of a long story here, but he talks about how Lee told him he would pick him up in his shiny kind of sports car. He was from the Twin Cities, so he wanted to kind of get used to southern Minnesota. And so Lee picked him up and said he was going to take him to New Ulm, or New Ulm, ever how you pronounce that. And Lee proceeded to drive to this very attractive young lady's house whose name is Jodi. And Lee proceeded to talk to her for 3 hours while our new Bethany recruits sat in the car without anything to do. And evidently it was time well invested for Lee. And then finally, I remember the look of anguish on Lee's face as he ran polls with everything he has, just like everything he does in his life is 100%. And then the last story I'll tell about Lee is that when we were on the road, we had a lot of personalities on this team. Great group of guys, but a lot of personalities. So we would strategically room Lee with a particular player that needed Lee's guidance. And Lee did a great job of bringing him along. And so he was a great leader from that standpoint. Positive attitude certainly describes Lee, and everything was always good for Lee. I really don't think I could have finished my coaching career in baseball here with a group better, but certainly Lee was one that stood out and really made it fun for me to go to work every day with the pitchers and catchers. I am extremely proud to be able to be the person to introduce him tonight and to justify why he's here tonight. The minimal part of his statistics, the big part is who he is. But when we look, as coaches, you look for consistency, right? You just like to know what you're going to get every night. Well, as a freshman, he hit 363. As a sophomore, he hit 351. 539 slugging percentage. His freshman year, 493. His sophomore year, he was a Gold Glove Award winner, had 1 error as a catcher here. He had the highest GPA. He epitomizes what we would look like, I think, in our athletes here and as they move forward. And then I had the pleasure today at lunch of watching Lee interact with with his son Lucas. Great player, great person, great dad. Lee, gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome you to the podium to accept your nomination. Lee Brandel. Congratulations.
Thanks for the kind words, Coach. It is an honor to receive this acknowledgement. First and foremost, we need to give thanks to God, our Redeemer, for allowing Bethany Lutheran College to exist and succeed over the past 110 years. Bethany remains committed to sharing the one thing needful, that is the gospel of Jesus. Thank you to Bethany for putting on this event, and thank you to all the people behind the scenes to make this a success. Congratulations to Jerald, Kyle, Jeff, and Jodi for your accomplishments both athletically and academically. No one achieves a dream alone. There are the coaches, the teammates, and where it started with me, and probably most of you, is with your parents. My parents raised my sister and I in a Christian home. They instilled a hard work ethic in us from little on. They taught us the importance of respect, responsibility, and persistence in whatever you do, whether it was in the classroom or the athletic field, which leads to everyday life. They led by example of how to develop the mental and physical characteristics needed to succeed in life, the character to continue on, especially during the hard times when life throws a curveball. They taught us to make work fun. A special thanks to my mom. You were always my biggest fan. You supported me through the many years of playing baseball. You came and put many miles on the vehicle and came to as many games as you could. And whether we won or lost, whether I struck out or hit a home run, you were always positive. You complimented. You always looked on the bright side. Now, back in 1998, we actually had a physical mailbox here. So we checked that mailbox. Now, some of the younger people, not to be confused with an email, right? So during those spring baseball seasons, There was many letters in the mailboxes from home with words of encouragement along with updates as well. So Mom and Dad, this is an honor for you as well today. Thank you. To my sister April, who threw me countless batting practice sessions on a makeshift field in Bernardy, Minnesota. Now, I think they went a little something like this. I'd beg and beg her to throw me some batting practice. And she would give in, but it was after a lot of begging. But it was on two conditions. One, I don't hit the ball back up the middle and hit her, because then it would be over instantly. And two, I'd have to shag the balls, but make it quick because she wanted to get back home, right? So we had about 4 or 5 baseballs then. I'd hit them, and I'd run as fast as I could to get them, but I'd keep an eye on her because I'd be scared she'd go home and my night was over, right? But the coaxing would work, and 7 or 8 rounds later, or until it got dark, she kept throwing to me. So April, thank you. A special thank you to my cousins. One of them's here today. It always went without saying to bring a baseball glove to any family event. And to this day, it continues with our kids and his kids. And that's a great trait to pass on to the next generation. Now, finally, to the teammates, this is where it all began, is with you. Thank you for those that attended today and took off work and flew here. You are all recipients of this honor tonight. This award doesn't exist without you. Baseball is a team sport. You all competed at the highest level, which is evidenced in the championships we won here, but they were together. We had talented baseball players and athletes on this team, and we had some pretty good IQs because, they knew how to run those polls effectively, efficiently. One characteristic of all of us, though, was our desire to compete. We came together from all walks of life and united here at Bethany to play baseball. We competed against each other in practice and quickly became united in a common goal, and that was to win. We practiced hard, we played hard. We spent a lot of times together in those years at Bethany, from working out, practices, traveling, going to games, and going to class. We all loved to compete and were highly competitive. This time together created and formed a brotherhood. Now, this competitiveness spilled over outside of the baseball diamond on many occasions. There was one day during a badminton Phi Ed class, and I'm not sure how many of us baseball players of why we ended up in that class together, but there was a teammate challenging anyone and anybody to a game of badminton after class, and he would play it on his knees. So it was quite impressive to watch him compete on his knees. Another instance was after practice was over, there was numerous challenges who could throw the ball the furthest from home plate over the outfield fence. One of my earliest memories of Bethany baseball was in the winter of 1999. It was the first practice we had as a group. We were inside the practice gym around 6 a.m. After stretching, we partnered up on opposite sides of the gym and began playing catch. Coach Westphal and Woodley would intermingle with the players. They would walk around and stand with their back to your opposing partner. And I know they did this to intimidate you and to instill a little nervousness. And just like that, the baseballs were bouncing off the bleachers, off the floor, and the sound was awful. Here was a group of talented baseball players from the upper Midwest, and they couldn't even play catch. I remember thinking to myself, Coach Westphal must be thinking, what type of guys do I have to work with here? Now, Coach referred to the 2-mile run, and that first fall of our freshman year, there was some sophomores, which are upperclassmen then, kind of saying, hey, if you don't get it under a certain time, you're not going to make the team. Now, I didn't really believe that was true because we were here to play baseball, not run track, but I didn't want to take any chances. So after the first mile, I was up in the lead, and there was only a few other guys near me, so I thought, well, I might as well win this thing. So I did what I could, and I won it. However, it came with a price because after practice, I showered, skipped supper, and went right to bed. It was only 6:30 at night. As a catcher, I had the honor of seeing firsthand the quality of players we had. I literally had the best seat in the house. This team played confident, played loose, and played well together from the onset. We formed a great team. And to all the pitchers, it was enjoyable working with you as your battery mate. The pitching mound can be the loneliest place on the diamond, but you guys stepped up to the challenge and gave us a chance to win every game, so thank you. Coach Westphal, one thing we learned about you is that you're bilingual. On one of our trips down to Kirkwood in Iowa, our first freshman year, I mean, you were speaking some pretty good Spanish to us, and I was pretty impressed. I think we all were. But Coach, it was an honor and privilege to play baseball for you and for Bethany. You were very welcoming when I came here with my parents to visit. So thank you for your decades of service. You've always represented Bethany with class, professionalism, and humility. My focus now is my personal Hall of Fame. The Lord has blessed me with a wife of 20 plus years. Jodi, you're my soulmate, my best friend. I love you. I look forward to the next 20 years. The Lord has blessed us with 2 children, Laura and Lucas. Laura and Lucas, I am very proud of you. We enjoy watching you grow. Continue to keep Jesus in your life. And like we say each morning when I drop you off for school, win the day. Thank you to all those that traveled and took time off of work to make it here tonight. You all played an important role in my baseball journey. It was a privilege and honor to play baseball for Bethany. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I've worked at Bethany 30 years now. This is a big portion of my life. Sometimes people wonder, how can you stick around Bethany for 30 years of your life? What you just witnessed for the last couple hours is why it is so powerful to work at this place. Because I had the privilege to watch most of these athletes participate and share their gift with us outside of Mr. Binder. But again, the stories I've heard about his talent are great. But then to see them come back here tonight with teammates and to read their bios and the way they give back to their communities. And, you know, coaching youth sports. Bruds, I've seen you referee giving back to the community in that regards for so many years. It is so impactful to work at a place like Bethany and to be part of the stories that you 5 shared with us this evening. So thank you very much for your time and your talents and your gifts. And again, what Lee just talked about, the one thing needful in the mission of Bethany and how that just is so entrenched into what we do here. It's a very powerful night. So thank you all very much for what you've lent to us and made it such a special part in the way to kick off Fall Festival. I would ask the 5 inductees, if you would come back up. You can bring your plaques. We're going to take some pictures on behalf of the college, but I know family members are going to want to take pictures here with the backdrop as well. So thank you again for your time. It's been a great evening. Lord's blessings on your weekend. Safe travels home as well. Hopefully we'll see you for other events here on campus this weekend. Remember those tomorrow, as well as the chapel program and service on Sunday morning. Thanks very much.